Wade Collier was 38 years old, and until the morning a FedEx envelope landed on his desk, he thought the worst of it was behind him. The divorce had been clean, or so Trish believed. She'd walked away with the joint account, the condo, and the absolute certainty that she had outgrown him, that she had traded up. Wade had let her believe every word of it. What Trish didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that the modest car, the long hours, the quiet life she'd dismissed as mediocrity were a deliberate construction. The LLCs were real. The acquisitions were real. The penthouse office, where two men in expensive suits waited nervously for his signature every morning, was real. She had spent 6 years building a story about a man going nowhere. Then she mailed him a wedding invitation, not out of courtesy, but out of cruelty. She wanted him in the audience, proof that she had won. So Wade showed up. He just didn't arrive by car. When the sound of rotor blades silenced every conversation on that Buckhead estate lawn, and a black helicopter descended with 2 bodyguards stepping out first, every guest, every family member, and the man standing at that altar turned to look. What happened next would cost Trish everything she thought she'd secured, but she never saw it coming. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, Atlanta's skyline stretched out like a steel and glass forest. Wade Collier sat at the head of a polished mahogany conference table, methodically reviewing each page of the acquisition document. His Mont Blanc pen moved with deliberate precision, his signature flowing across each marked line without hesitation. Across the table, Richard Whitman and James Peterson, both senior partners at their respective firms, shifted in their Italian leather chairs. Their expensive suits couldn't hide their growing impatience. They weren't used to waiting on anyone, but Wade had learned long ago that patience was a form of power. "Just a few more minutes, gentlemen," Wade said without looking up, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who knew his worth wasn't measured by other people's time. The property they were discussing, a prime piece of commercial real estate in Buckhead, had been on Wade's radar for months. Like everything else in his portfolio, he'd approached it carefully, strategically, letting others make noise while he worked in silence. His mind drifted briefly to Trish, who never understood this part of him. During their 6 years of marriage, she'd seen his measured approach as hesitation, his strategic patience as lack of ambition. She wanted flash, wanted status she could show off at charity galas and country club brunches. "You need to think bigger," she'd say, gesturing at his sensible sedan while her friends' husbands drove German sports cars. "Don't you want people to know what you're worth?" But Wade had learned from Lydia Okafor, his attorney, early in his career, true wealth stayed quiet. He'd structured everything through LLCs and trusts, not just for tax purposes, but for protection. When Trish's attitude toward him began to sour, that separation between his visible life and his actual worth had become a wall he maintained with increasing care. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. His assistant, Sarah, entered with a FedEx envelope. "I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Collier, but this was marked urgent." Wade nodded, taking the envelope. "Thank you, Sarah. Could you bring in some fresh coffee for our guests?" The 2 men across the table straightened slightly at the consideration, their impatience momentarily forgotten. This, too, was something Wade had learned. Small gestures often carried more weight than grand ones. He returned to the documents, completing his review with the same careful attention. Every detail mattered. That was something Trish never grasped. She saw his late nights at the office as evidence of a man struggling to keep up. In reality, he was building an empire, piece by quiet piece. "Everything appears to be in order," Wade said finally, sliding the signed papers across the table. "Sarah will make copies for everyone. I appreciate your patience with my review process." The men practically sagged with relief, gathering their briefcases. Wade stood, shook their hands with firm courtesy, and walked them to the door. As soon as they left, he returned to his desk, picking up the FedEx envelope. Inside was a cream-colored envelope, heavy cardstock with gold embossing, wedding invitation quality. He opened it carefully, unfolding the elaborate calligraphy inside. Patricia Ann Washington and Garrett Michael Holloway request the honor of your presence. Wade read it twice, his expression unchanged. The same discipline that had built his fortune now kept his features perfectly neutral. Trish had found what she thought she wanted. A man who wore success like a designer suit, who made big moves she could brag about at parties. He set the invitation down on his desk, reaching for his phone. 3 rings later, his brother's voice came through. "Wade, what's up? She invited me to the wedding." A long pause on the other end. Then Jerome's voice, incredulous. "She did what?" Wade looked out at the Atlanta skyline. His skyline, though Trish never knew it. "I'm going." The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. Jerome, who'd watched his brother build this life brick by careful brick, knew exactly what that calm statement meant. The silence on the phone stretched for another moment, before Jerome's voice erupted again. "You cannot be serious. After everything she did? After how she talked about you? She's got some nerve sending you that invitation." Wade leaned back in his chair, phone to his ear, watching the late afternoon sun glint off the buildings outside. "She's not inviting me to be nice, Jerome. This is her victory lap." "What do you mean?" "Think about it," Wade said, his voice remaining measured. "She wants me there to prove her point, to show everyone she traded up. The struggling ex-husband watching from the crowd while she marries the successful real estate broker. It's theater." Jerome's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Successful? Man's got more debt than a college freshman with a credit card. If she only knew—" "She will," Wade said simply. There was a pause as Jerome processed his brother's tone. "Wait, you're really going to do this?" "I am." "Why? Why give her the satisfaction of showing up?" Wade stood, walking to the window. Below, Atlanta's streets were filling with evening traffic, people heading home from their offices. "Because I have nothing to be ashamed of. Never did. She built a story about who I was, told it to everyone who would listen. Time for that story to end. And you're sure about this? This isn't about trying to win her back or—" "Jerome," Wade cut him off gently. "That's not what this is. The woman I loved hasn't existed for years. Maybe never did. This is about truth." He could hear Jerome settling into the idea, his initial outrage giving way to understanding. "So, what's the play? First, I need to make a call to Lydia. Make sure there's no legal exposure. Then we'll handle logistics. I want you there before I arrive." "Before you arrive?" Jerome's voice held a note of curiosity. "How exactly are you planning to arrive?" "The helicopter. 2 security personnel. Nothing flashy, just professional." Jerome's laughter filled the line. "Nothing flashy? Brother, you're going to land a helicopter at her wedding. I'm going to arrive at a social event using my normal mode of business transportation," Wade corrected mildly. "The fact that she doesn't know it's my normal mode of transportation isn't my problem." After ending the call with Jerome, Wade contacted Lydia Okafor. His attorney's response was characteristically precise. "There's no legal restriction preventing your attendance," Lydia confirmed after reviewing the invitation. "It's a public event. You were formally invited. And your method of arrival, while dramatic, is within standard parameters for your business operations." Over the next few weeks, Wade coordinated the details with his usual thoroughness. His pilot filed flight plans. His security team did advance work on the venue. Jerome would arrive early, take his assigned seat, and wait. The morning of the wedding arrived clear and bright. Wade stood in his penthouse bedroom, adjusting his charcoal suit in the full-length mirror. No tie. He never wore them unless absolutely necessary. The suit was perfectly tailored, but understated, like everything else in his life. He thought about Trish getting ready at this same moment, probably surrounded by bridesmaids, feeling triumphant. She'd be beautiful, she always was. But for the first time since their divorce, he felt nothing about that beauty. The ache that had lingered in his chest had finally faded completely. His phone buzzed. Jerome checking in. "Everything set?" "All good," Wade replied. "You know where to be?" "Third row, left side, aisle seat." "I'll be the handsome one in the blue suit trying not to grin." Wade smiled slightly. "Keep it professional, Jerome. This isn't about making a scene," says the man about to land a helicopter at his ex-wife's wedding. "I'll see you there." Wade ended the call and did one final check in the mirror. His reflection showed exactly what he wanted it to show. A man at peace with himself, unhurried and unworried. He picked up his keys and phone, heading for the private elevator that would take him to the helipad on the building's roof. The morning sun was bright, the sky a perfect Georgia blue. Above the city's ambient noise, he could hear the helicopter's rotors already spinning up, his pilot running through pre-flight checks. It was going to be an interesting afternoon. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawn of the Buckhead estate. White chairs lined up in perfect rows, filled with guests in their Sunday best, programs fluttering in their hands like nervous birds. At the altar, decorated with cascading white flowers and gauzy fabric, Garrett Holloway stood with his groomsmen, designer sunglasses perched on his face, his smile confident and wide. Donna Washington moved between the rows with practiced efficiency, checking names off her list and directing late arrivals to their seats. Her perfectly coiffed hair caught the sunlight as she bent to whisper something to the hostess, gesturing at the seating chart with manicured fingers. In the front row, Frank Washington sat quietly, tugging occasionally at his collar. His discomfort showed in the way he kept shifting in his chair, in how his eyes darted between the altar and the ground. He looked like a man who wanted to be anywhere else. The string quartet had just begun another gentle piece when the first guest heard it, a distant thumping sound that grew steadily louder. Heads turned skyward as the steady chop of rotor blades cut through the peaceful afternoon air. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Programs lowered. All eyes fixed on the sleek black helicopter appearing over the tree line. Garrett's smile flickered for just a moment as the aircraft descended toward the adjacent field, kicking up grass and causing the decorative arrangements to sway. The corporate helicopter, unmarked, immaculately maintained, touched down with precision on the grass. The door opened. Two men in dark suits emerged first, their movements practiced and professional. Earpieces glinted in the sun as they scanned the area with subtle efficiency. Then Wade stepped out. He moved with unhurried grace, his charcoal suit perfect against the backdrop of polished black metal. He carried nothing, needed nothing. The bodyguards fell into position as he walked toward the ceremony space, their presence both obvious and unobtrusive. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Phones appeared in hands. Garrett's groomsmen exchanged glances. Wade found his seat near the back, settling in with quiet dignity, as if arriving by helicopter was the most natural thing in the world. Jerome, already in position in his blue suit, gave his brother a slight nod. No words were needed. Frank Washington turned in his seat, his eyes finding Wade's. Something passed between them in that moment. Recognition, understanding, respect. Wade nodded once. Frank held his gaze for a long moment before returning the gesture with a gravity that spoke volumes. Donna noticed the exchange and leaned over to her husband, whispering furiously. Frank remained still, his eyes forward, his silence its own kind of answer. The ceremony started 15 minutes late. When Trish appeared at the end of the aisle, she was a vision in white, her composure perfect, her smile radiant. But as she passed Wade's row, her eyes found him. The look lasted just a heartbeat too long, long enough for everyone watching to notice. long enough to matter. Wade met her gaze steadily, his face calm and unreadable. Then he looked away, turning his attention to the program in his hands. The dismissal was subtle but clear, not born of hurt or anger, but of genuine disinterest. Trish's step faltered almost imperceptibly before she continued her walk to the altar. During the reception, as guests mingled with champagne glasses in hand, Garrett made his way to Wade's table. His approach was smooth, practiced, the movement of a man used to working rooms and making deals. "Wade Collier," he said, extending his hand. "Trish mentioned you. What do you do?" Wade's handshake was firm but brief. "Real estate," he replied with a pleasant smile that revealed nothing. "No kidding." Garrett's interest sharpened visibly. "Commercial or residential?" "Development. Acquisitions, mostly." "Who do you work for?" Wade's smile didn't change. "Myself." He stood, straightening his jacket. "If you'll excuse me." Before Garrett could press further, Wade was moving through the crowd with purpose. He stopped at Frank Washington's table. The older man stood immediately, taking Wade's hand in both of his. "She made a mistake, son," Frank said quietly, his voice heavy with meaning. Wade's response was simple. "I know." He left before the servers brought out the first course, his security team falling into step beside him. As the reception music began to play, the helicopter's rotors spun up. 3 different phones captured its ascent into the darkening sky, recording the moment when Wade Collier disappeared into the evening, leaving behind a crowd of people who would never see him quite the same way again. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Wade's penthouse office, casting long shadows across the polished conference table. A week had passed since the wedding. 3 acquisition proposals lay open before him, each representing a different piece of Atlanta's growing commercial landscape. He made notes in precise handwriting, his focus absolute. His cell phone buzzed. Lydia Okafor's name appeared on the screen. "Wade," she said when he answered, her voice carrying its usual professional clarity. "I have something you need to hear. Are you somewhere private?" He closed the folder in front of him. "I am now. I've been running standard due diligence on that Southwest Atlanta property you're bidding on, the mixed-use development site near the Beltline." She paused, papers shuffling in the background. "There's a competing bid from Holloway Realty Group." Wade leaned back in his chair. "Garrett's company?" "Yes. As part of our standard vetting process, I pulled their financial disclosures." Another pause. "Wade, he's underwater. Completely." Wade said nothing, waiting. "The brokerage has missed 3 loan payments in the last 6 months. Every visible asset, the Porsche, the office lease, everything. It's all financed through high-interest loans. His personal credit report shows multiple accounts in collection." Lydia's voice remained steady, clinical. "The man is functionally broke. The entire operation is held together with leverage and prayer." Wade looked out at the Atlanta skyline, processing. "The wedding? Financed. The honeymoon, too, from what I can tell. But here's what's interesting. He's been aggressively seeking partnerships with established developers for the past year. He needs fresh capital and clean credit. Your ex-wife brought both to the marriage." The irony settled like lead in Wade's stomach. Trish had left him believing he lacked ambition, choosing instead a man whose entire life was a financial house of cards. "There's more," Lydia continued. "While reviewing the divorce records, I found something in the timeline. Your ex-wife's attorney filed a declaration about marital assets 3 weeks before she told you she wanted to end the marriage. The retainer was paid a week before that." Wade's free hand tightened slightly on his armrest, the only visible sign of impact. "She planned it while she was still living in our house." "Yes, while still sleeping in your bed." From the dates, Wade absorbed this in silence, letting the full weight of it settle. Not just the betrayal itself, but the calculated nature. The methodical dismantling of their life together had begun weeks before she'd looked him in the eye and said it was over. Thank you, Lydia, he said finally. Send me everything you have. Already done. It's in your secure folder. A brief hesitation. Wade, I'm sorry. Don't be. This is valuable information. His voice remained steady. Let me know what else you find. After ending the call, Wade sat motionless for several long minutes, watching the city bustle below. The revelation about Garrett's finances wasn't surprising. He'd sensed the hollow performance behind the man's confidence at the wedding. But the timeline of Trish's exit, that landed differently. He worked through the rest of the afternoon with mechanical precision, signing documents and taking calls as if nothing had changed. But as the sun began to set, he gathered his things and headed to his car. The drive to Jerome's house took 30 minutes in evening traffic. His brother opened the door before Wade could knock. One look at his face telling him everything he needed to know. Come in, Jerome said, leading him to the kitchen. He pulled 2 glasses from a cabinet and reached for the good bourbon he kept on the top shelf. What happened? Wade sat at the counter and laid out everything Lydia had told him, his voice maintaining its usual measured calm. Jerome's reaction was anything but measured. She was planning to leave while still living in your house? Jerome paced the kitchen, his anger visible in every movement. And this joker she married is broke? Actually broke. Structurally broke, Wade corrected, taking a slow sip of bourbon. There's a difference. Man, I don't care what kind of broke it is. Jerome stopped pacing to stare at his brother. How are you so calm right now? Wade set his glass down carefully. Because anger doesn't serve any purpose here. Information does. The Sunday morning sun filtered through Beverly Collier's kitchen windows, warming the worn wooden table where she and Wade had shared countless conversations over coffee. The familiar aroma of her preferred dark roast blend filled the air, a constant through all the years and changes. Wade sat across from his mother, his hands wrapped around a steaming mug. Beverly moved with her usual precise grace, setting out cream and sugar, though she knew Wade took his coffee black. Some habits of motherhood never changed, but something was different this morning. Beverly's usual warmth felt measured, contained. She hadn't asked about work or commented on the latest neighborhood gossip. Instead, she watched Wade with careful eyes as he sipped his coffee. The helicopter story has been making rounds, she said finally, her voice neutral. Margaret called yesterday. Wade nodded. Margaret was one of Beverly's oldest friends, part of their church circle for over 20 years. She'd attended his wedding to Trish. She had something she thought I should see. Beverly reached into the drawer beside her chair and removed a folded piece of paper. She's had it for a while. Felt guilty about not sharing it sooner. She slid the paper across the table without further explanation. Wade set down his coffee and unfolded it carefully. The paper was a printed screenshot of a Facebook message, dated 4 years into his marriage to Trish, 2 years before she filed for divorce. His eyes moved across the words methodically. I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending everything's fine. Wade is... He's the type of man who'll be a warehouse supervisor at 50. Satisfied with nothing, going nowhere, content to be ordinary. I look at him sometimes, and all I see is limited dreams, limited vision. I'm only staying because divorce feels like failure, and I'm not ready to admit I made a mistake. But watching him be so satisfied with mediocrity is slowly killing me. The message was sent to Margaret, who had apparently carried it silently all these years, until the helicopter landing shook something loose in her conscience. Wade read it once more, his expression unchanging. Then he folded the paper with the same careful precision he'd used to open it, tucking it into his jacket pocket. Beverly watched him, her hands clasped tightly around her coffee mug. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence. She wrote that while we were still living together, Wade said finally. While we were still sharing meals, making plans, sleeping in the same bed? Yes, Beverly said quietly. She smiled at me every morning for 2 more years after writing this. Told me she loved me. Made Christmas plans with my family. His voice remained steady. But Beverly heard the weight beneath the words. "I wanted to tell you when Margaret first showed me," Beverly admitted. "But it wasn't my place then. The marriage was yours to navigate." Wade nodded, understanding. His mother had always respected boundaries, even when it cost her to do so. "Are you all right?" Beverly asked finally, her voice soft with maternal concern. Wade considered the question honestly. The revelation should have devastated him. Proof that the woman he'd loved had held him in secret contempt while maintaining a facade of commitment. But instead, he felt an unexpected lightness. "I am," he said, meeting his mother's eyes. "For the first time since she left, I actually am." "Why?" "Because I've spent 18 months wondering if I failed that marriage. If I should have done something different, been something more." He paused, taking another sip of coffee. "But I didn't fail anything. The marriage was over in her mind long before it ended on paper. She just didn't have the courage to say it to my face." Beverly reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. Her skin was warm from the coffee mug. "You know what the strangest part is?" Wade continued. "If she'd just been honest about her feelings, about Garrett, about any of it, I would have respected that more than the performance she gave instead." The Sunday morning light stretched across the kitchen floor, casting long shadows. In Beverly's garden outside, birds visited the feeder she'd maintained for 20 years, their movements quick and purposeful. "You're a good man, Wade," Beverly said finally. "The kind who builds things that last." She just couldn't see it. The downtown Atlanta office building was deliberately unremarkable. 15 stories of beige concrete and tinted windows, the kind of structure people walked past without noticing. Wade maintained a small suite on the 8th floor, specifically for meetings like this one. His phone buzzed with a message from Lydia. "Holloway confirmed for 2 p.m. "Are you sure about this?" Wade texted back a simple, "Yes," and straightened his navy button down. No tie, no jacket, nothing that suggested the wealth he actually commanded. The conference room was functional but modest. Water-spotted ceiling tiles, a scratched table that had seen better days, 4 comfortable but aging chairs. Everything about it said, mid-level developer trying to make it. At exactly 2 o'clock, the receptionist showed Garrett Holloway in. He wore a tailored gray suit that probably cost more than the conference room furniture combined. His smile was practiced, confident, the smile of a man who believed completely in his own performance. "Wade," Garrett extended his hand. "Thanks for making the time. I have to admit, I was surprised when Marcus mentioned you might be interested in talking about the Southwest Atlanta project." Marcus was the business intermediary Garrett had used to arrange the meeting, a commercial real estate broker who didn't know Wade well enough to know better. "Have a seat." Wade gestured to the chair across from him. He kept his voice pleasant but unremarkable. "Tell me what you're thinking." Garrett launched into his pitch with the smooth assurance of someone who had closed deals on charm before. He outlined his vision for the Southwest Atlanta property: mixed-use development, retail frontage, luxury apartments in the back. His hands moved expressively as he talked, painting pictures in the air. "The market's ready for this kind of upgrade in that neighborhood," Garrett continued. "I've got relationships with 3 potential anchor tenants already expressing interest." Wade listened, noting how Garrett used future revenue projections to gloss over current financial requirements. He waited until Garrett finished his initial presentation before asking his first question. "What's your equity position look like?" Garrett's smile didn't waver, but something flickered behind his eyes. "I've got several interested investors lined up. Once we have the basic partnership structure in place, I can bring them to the table." Wade nodded, keeping his face neutral. "And your current portfolio? What kind of projects have you completed in this size range?" "Holloway Realty Group has brokered over $50 million in commercial transactions in the last 3 years, Garrett said smoothly, sliding around the fact that brokering deals wasn't the same as developing properties. Wade let the answer hang in the air for a moment, before asking his final question. Why this property specifically? Something in his tone made Garrett pause. The broker studied Wade's face more carefully, perhaps sensing for the first time that the unassuming man across the table was asking more precise questions than he'd initially realized. Location and timing. Garrett recovered quickly. The area's undervalued, but that's changing fast. Getting in now with the right vision could transform the whole neighborhood. Wade nodded again, his expression pleasant and unrevealing. I appreciate you laying all this out. Let me review everything, and I'll have my team circle back next week. Excellent. Garrett stood, straightening his perfect suit. I look forward to exploring this partnership further. I think we could do something special here. Wade walked him to the reception area, shook his hand with exactly the right amount of professional warmth, and waited until the elevator doors closed behind him. Then he pulled out his phone and called Lydia. Pull everything, he said without preamble. Every loan, every lien, every debt instrument associated with Holloway Realty Group. I want to know exactly what he owes and to whom. And I want to know who's holding those notes right now. Already started, Lydia replied. Give me a week to get the full picture. 1 week, Wade agreed. And Lydia? Be thorough. He ended the call and walked back into the conference room, looking out over the Atlanta skyline through the smudged windows. A brief, rare smile crossed his face as he thought about Garrett's performance. All that confidence, all that charm, and not a single solid number in the entire presentation. The smile wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity, about watching someone try to sell you a story they didn't realize you could already read straight through. The morning sun filled Wade's penthouse office, casting long shadows across the polished conference table where Lydia Okafor spread out her findings. She moved with the precise efficiency of someone who had spent 2 decades protecting wealthy clients' interests, laying out document after document in organized sections. The debt structure is exactly what we suspected, Lydia began, her voice matter-of-fact. Holloway Realty Group has 3 outstanding commercial loans totaling just over $2 million. They've missed payments on 2 of them. The Porsche is 3 months behind on lease payments. The office lease has late fees dating back 6 months. Wade nodded, scanning the documents with practiced ease. Nothing surprising there, just confirmation of what they'd already pieced together about Garrett's financial house of cards. But that's not why I came in person, Lydia continued, her tone shifting slightly. She pulled a single document from a separate folder. While tracking down property records, my investigator found something in the rental histories, something that doesn't match the timeline we were given. Wade looked up, catching the careful way Lydia chose her words. She rarely editorialized findings. Her professional detachment was one of her greatest assets. But there was something in her voice now, a slight hesitation that made him focus more intently. What did you find? Lydia slid the document across the table. It was a lease agreement for a luxury short-term rental property in Buckhead, dated 5 years ago. 2 signatures at the bottom, Garrett Holloway and Patricia Washington. Wade stared at the document, his mind automatically calculating backwards. 5 years ago. 1 year before Trish had written that Facebook message calling him ordinary. 3 full years before she told him she wanted a divorce. 3 years before she claimed to have reconnected with Garrett after the marriage ended. We verified the signatures, Lydia continued quietly, and the payment records. They maintained the lease for 6 months. Wade stood slowly, document in hand, and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. Atlanta sprawled out below, morning traffic crawling through the downtown streets. He could see his reflection ghosted against the skyline, still and straight-backed, the paper hanging loose in his grip. Everything reorganized itself in his mind. Not a marriage that had slowly crumbled under the weight of different ambitions. Not even a wife who had grown contemptuous, and then found someone new. This was something else entirely. A deliberate double life, maintained for years. Every complaint about his lack of ambition, every dismissive comment about his potential, every argument about their future. It had all been carefully constructed cover for a choice she had already made. She hadn't just lied to him. She had lied to everyone. To Frank, who had always liked Wade. To Donna, who had believed her daughter deserved better. To their entire social circle. She had built an entire false narrative about Wade's inadequacies to justify an exit she had planned years in advance. The silence in the office stretched out. Lydia waited, understanding that some revelations required space to land fully. Wade continued staring out at the city, completely still except for the slight movement of his thumb running over the edge of the paper. Finally, he turned back to Lydia. "Thank you for bringing this to me directly." She nodded, gathering her materials with practiced efficiency. "Do you want me to prepare any kind of formal response?" "Not yet," Wade said quietly. "Give me 24 hours. After Lydia left, Wade sat in one of the leather chairs by the window, still holding the lease document. The morning sun had climbed higher, warming the glass. He reached for his phone and called Jerome. "Yeah?" Jerome answered on the first ring. "Can you come to the office?" Wade's voice was steady, but Jerome would know something was wrong. "On my way. What happened? I'll show you when you get here." 30 minutes later, Jerome stood at the window next to Wade. The document crumpled slightly where he had gripped it too hard while reading. "What do you want to do?" Wade's reflection in the glass was perfectly composed. "Two things. I want her parents to know the truth, and I want Garrett out of my market. In that order?" "In that order." The morning air was crisp as Wade pulled into the parking lot of the Silver Skillet, an old Atlanta diner that had been serving breakfast since the 1950s. The neon sign flickered dimly against the pale morning light, and through the window he could already see Frank Washington seated in a corner booth, a cup of coffee steaming in front of him. Wade had chosen this place deliberately. Neutral ground, quiet enough for conversation, but public enough to keep everything civilized. He gathered the manila envelope from his passenger seat and walked inside, the bell above the door announcing his arrival with a gentle chime. Frank stood as Wade approached, extending his hand. His grip was firm, but there was something tentative in his eyes, like a man bracing himself for news he already suspected was coming. "Thank you for meeting me," Wade said, sliding into the booth. "Been expecting your call, if I'm honest," Frank replied, settling back into his seat. A waitress appeared with a fresh coffee pot, and Wade nodded his thanks as she filled his cup. The morning regulars were scattered around the diner, their quiet conversations and the clink of silverware creating a gentle background hum. Wade took his time, adding cream to his coffee, stirring it slowly. Frank waited, patient in the way fathers learn to be. "I didn't come here to hurt anyone," Wade began, his voice low and steady. "But there are some things you should know. Things that affect your family directly." Frank nodded, his weathered hands wrapped around his coffee cup. "About Trish and Garrett?" "Yes, and about how my marriage to your daughter really ended." Wade opened the manila envelope and laid out two documents on the table between them. "This first one is a filing from Trish's divorce attorney. Look at the date." Frank put on his reading glasses, studying the paper carefully. 3 weeks before she told me she wanted a divorce," Wade finished quietly. "She had the attorney on retainer while we were still sharing a bed, still having Sunday dinners together." Frank's jaw tightened slightly, but he said nothing, reaching for the second document. His hand paused momentarily when he saw the signatures at the bottom of the lease agreement. 5 years ago, Wade said softly. "Not 2 years ago when she said they reconnected after our divorce. 5 years ago, while we were still married." The breakfast crowd continued their conversations around them, unaware of the weight settling over the corner booth. Frank removed his glasses slowly, folding them with deliberate care. "She told us you two had drifted apart," he said finally, his voice heavy with realization. "Said you were checked out, focused on work, emotionally absent. I know what she told you." Wade's voice held no anger, just quiet certainty. "She told a lot of people a lot of things about me, about who I was, what I wanted. where I was going in life. Frank stared at the documents for a long moment, then looked up at Wade. Why are you showing me this? Because you deserve to know what kind of man your daughter actually married, Wade replied. And because you deserve to know that when you sat in that church and watched her marry him, you were watching the end of something that started years before I knew anything was wrong. The waitress appeared again, coffee pot hovering. Both men shook their heads. Does Donna know any of this? Frank asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Not from me, Wade said. What you do with this information is your business. I'm not here to tell you how to handle your family. Frank nodded slowly, pushing his coffee cup aside. He reached for his wallet, but Wade raised a hand. Please, let me. No. Frank's voice was firm. This one's on me. They stood together, and Frank extended his hand again. This time he held on longer, his grip conveying everything his words couldn't. The bell chimed again as they walked out into the morning sun, now fully risen over Atlanta. Frank paused at his car, looking at Wade one last time. The weight of unspoken understanding passed between them. The truth couldn't be unknown once it was known, and nothing would be the same in the Washington family after today. Wade drove home through the morning traffic, knowing that the carefully constructed narrative Trish had built, the story of a reasonable woman who had simply outgrown an unambitious man, was now crumbling at its foundation, inside the very family she had performed it for most carefully. Wade was reviewing property assessments in his penthouse office when his phone buzzed. Trish's name appeared on the screen. He took a slow breath, then answered. Hello, Trish. My father came to me with some story about dates and documents. Her voice was tightly controlled, but he could hear the strain beneath it. I don't know what you think you're doing. I'm not doing anything, Trish, Wade said calmly. I had a conversation with your father. A conversation? The edge in her voice sharpened. You showed up with paperwork, Wade. With timelines. What exactly are you trying to prove? I'm not trying to prove anything. Your father deserved to know the truth. The truth? She laughed, but it wasn't happy. You show up at my wedding in a helicopter, then ambush my father with ancient history? Is this about making yourself look important now? Trying to show everyone how successful you've become? Wade recognized the old pattern, her attempt to reframe his actions through the lens of inadequacy, to make this about his need for validation rather than her actions. He didn't take the bait. Your father asked me one question that day at the diner, he said quietly. He told me what you'd said about our marriage, that we drifted apart, that I was emotionally absent. He deserved to know that wasn't true. So this is revenge? Her voice rose slightly. You're trying to turn my family against me? No, Trish. This is honesty, something that's been missing from your narrative for a long time. There was a pause on the line. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted. Softer, almost reasonable. Wade, if you're still angry about how things ended— I'm not angry, he interrupted, his voice remaining steady. You spent 6 years deciding I was nothing. You told your friends I'd be a warehouse supervisor at 50, content with mediocrity. You had your attorney on retainer 3 weeks before you told me you wanted a divorce. I let you believe what you wanted about me, because your opinion wasn't going to change what I was building. The silence stretched between them. But here's what you need to know now, Wade continued. Garrett is broke, Trish. Not temporarily. Structurally. The man you traded up to is upside down on everything he owns. I know, because I looked. I know, because I'm now one of his creditors. Her breath caught audibly. What are you talking about? Every asset he claims is leveraged beyond its value. The Porsche, the office lease, the lifestyle you married into, it's all debt-financed. And he's missed multiple payments. You're lying, she whispered, but there was uncertainty in her voice. You know I'm not. Deep down, you've probably suspected something wasn't adding up. I'm not telling you this to hurt you. I'm telling you Because you have a pattern of making life-altering decisions based on false information, and I won't be the reason you go into the next one blind. Why do you even care? The control in her voice was slipping. Because despite everything, I did love you once, and watching you build another life on another fiction isn't something I'm willing to do silently this time. Before she could respond, Wade ended the call. He set his phone down and looked out over the Atlanta skyline, the afternoon sun glinting off glass towers. His desk phone buzzed. "Mr. Collier, Ms. Okafor is on line 1. Put her through." "It's done," Lydia said without preamble. The note acquisition was completed 20 minutes ago. Clean, legal, fully documented. "Thank you, Lydia. Do you want me to initiate the call notice now?" "No," Wade said, still looking out at the city. "Let's wait. He'll figure it out soon enough." As if on cue, his phone buzzed again. "Mr. Collier, Garrett Holloway's attorney is asking to speak with legal counsel regarding a loan note transfer." "Forward him to Lydia," Wade said simply. He remained at the window, watching the city move below. The truth was out now. All of it. What happened next would happen in its own time, at its own pace. He had learned the value of patience. He could wait. The negotiations moved quickly, with a brutally simple clarity. Garrett's attorney made 3 counteroffers. Lydia rejected each one, citing the clear terms of the note and the documented payment defaults. Within 2 weeks, the reality became unavoidable. Garrett could not cure the default. The commercial division of Holloway Realty Group was liquidated in an orderly but final fashion. The office lease was terminated. Client files were transferred. 3 junior brokers found positions elsewhere. Garrett settled the note by surrendering assets that had been more leverage than substance. The Porsche went back to its primary lender a week later. Wade didn't watch any of it happen directly. He was focused on the Southwest Atlanta Development Project, which broke ground on schedule under clear autumn skies. The first phase of construction began with minimal fanfare. Just Wade, his project managers, and the necessary personnel. No ceremony, no speeches, just work starting the way work should start. The project attracted attention from institutional investors within its first quarter. The numbers were solid, the planning meticulous, the execution precise. A reporter from the Regional Business Journal reached out to Lydia, requesting an interview about the development and its impact on the surrounding community. "You don't have to do it," Lydia said when she called Wade, "but it might be worth considering. The project deserves the coverage." Wade agreed to 1 interview. No photos in the penthouse, no lifestyle angles. Just him on site, hard hat and work boots, talking about the development's goals and community impact. The story ran 3 weeks later. Wade on the cover, plans under his arm, looking directly at the camera with quiet confidence. Jerome had the cover framed immediately. "Mom needs this on her wall," he said, presenting it to Beverly on a Sunday afternoon. She hung it in her living room that same day, centered and visible from her favorite chair. Through the family grapevine, mostly Jerome's wife, who heard it from her cousin, who knew someone at Garrett's old firm, the details emerged in pieces. Garrett had taken a salaried position at Marcus & Bennett Real Estate, a larger brokerage that could absorb his experience while limiting his autonomy. The designer suits were gone, replaced by department store alternatives. The luxury condo had been traded for a modest house in the suburbs. Trish stayed. Whether from pride or practicality, or some combination of both, she remained Mrs. Holloway. The Sunday dinners at her parents' house resumed after a brief interruption, but something had shifted fundamentally in her relationship with Frank. Her father was unfailingly polite, properly attentive, but there was a new distance in his eyes when he looked at her, a careful measuring in his words. She felt it every time they sat at that familiar table, though she never found the courage to name it directly. Wade heard these details peripherally, through Beverly's gentle updates and Jerome's more animated reports. He let the information pass through him without weight. His focus remained on the project, on the daily work of building something substantial and real. The autumn turned to winter. Wade spent more time on site than in the penthouse, working closely with contractors and his project team. Sarah Chen, the project architect, had proven to be exceptionally talented, precise in her work, innovative in her solutions, direct in her communication. They were reviewing modified elevation plans one afternoon, when Wade made a dry observation about the city's permit process. Sarah laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound, and held the moment just a half-beat longer than the comment required. Their eyes met briefly over the blueprints. Wade noticed, driving home that evening, through Atlanta traffic made gentle by early darkness, Wade realized something. He hadn't thought about Trish in weeks. Not about the wedding, not about the helicopter, not about any of it. The revelation was quiet, but complete. He was building something. He had always been building something. The only difference was now he could do it in the open, without hesitation or apology, exactly as he had always intended to. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.